listening to Second Wind with Joyce Buford, where women who are ready to expand their life adventure discover the tools to stop playing small and tap into the courage required to enjoy their second wind. Welcome.
Welcome. You are listening to Second Wind. My guest today, I am thrilled to offer her to you. And I think which we visit, you're going to be so glad that you're listening to this podcast today. It is Katherine. Her name is Katherine Woodward Thomas. And she is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the New York Times bestselling author of Conscious Uncoupling, 5 Steps to Living Happily Ever After.
Even after.
Even after. I'm sorry.
That's right okay.
But anyway, her popular online program based on her books have attracted many to become certified coaches of her work. She is a Billboard charting jazz singer who claimed the #1 jazz artist spot on iTunes for her album, Lucky in Love. And by the way, I listened to it and it's awesome. You must go listen to it. And this was her Lucky in Love was co-written and co-produced with the brothers Corin. She lives in Northern California. So welcome, Katherine. This is a delight. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. And I can't believe that I haven't known you for all these years because you're just a force of nature. How inspiring you are.
Oh, thanks.
You're awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Anyway, I'm happy to be part of your tribe here now. This is great to be with y'all.
I did meet another member of your tribe that is following you, Joan.
Yes,
and she was previously recorded.
Oh, yeah. I love Joan.
Yeah.
Joan Breaker. Joan Breaker. Never Too Late for Love is Joan's book.
That's it.
Yeah. Wonderful.
I loved her story. So anyway, I'm going to talk about the psychotherapist first.
Okay.
Why did you decide that was the path you wanted to follow?
Gosh, it was almost like a lightning bolt, divine inspiration. I didn't come to that till I was in my mid-30s. Before that, I was a cabaret singer. I'm a trained actress from NYU. I went to Tisch School of the Arts, and I lived in Manhattan. But I didn't have the ego strength to really go for being an actor. I couldn't handle the rejection, and the anxiety of the pressure of those auditions were so intense for me. I would get laryngitis every time I had a Broadway audition. So I did my own thing. I did, exactly. Thank you, psychosomatic. But so I did my own thing and I did cabaret shows, which I loved. But that also meant I was a waitress for many years. You don't really make, so some people must make a living as a cabaret artist, but I couldn't figure that one out. But I was really an artist. What happened for me is that I had a very traumatic childhood, like many therapists, and I was working on myself. And I kind of one foot in front of the other, just found myself. And I'm also a person who loves to help others. I'm a helper. I'm #2 on the Enneagram. So if I go to Nordstrom's and there's a sale that's great, I call 4 of my girlfriends. Like that's the kind of person I am. So as I would discover things, I would pay them forward. I'd start teaching workshops. And I basically went to graduate school because I was creating things. I actually was creating projects where people were on the streets and recovering from homelessness, believe it or not.
Oh, what a great.
And I was doing creative workshops. I had a nonprofit called In Harmony with the Homeless. And I would come down and we'd do songwriting workshops about their healing and transformation and bring in artists to co-write with them. It was very heartfelt and wonderful. But then I thought, I need credentials for what I'm already doing. So that's when I went to graduate school. And I loved graduate school and I love being a therapist, but I don't do therapy anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it was precious work, but therapy is mostly about healing from childhood trauma, really,
Yeah.
and kind of the reclamation of the reclamation of parts of your soul that got stuck in the past. So
Mhm.
it's very sacred work. It's very holy, beautiful work. It's very deep work. But I got involved in my own personal path with the human potential movement. And I started to go to transformational seminars. And I'd been a meditator since I was 14 years old. So
Oh,
the spiritual
wonderful.
part was already there. But the transformational part came in my, I think late 30s, yeah, mid to late 30s. All this was happening around the same time. But I mean the landmark education or the Life
Oh,
Spring, which
yes.
doesn't exist anymore. Those kind of go to a seminar for 3 days and get shot out of a cannon, kind of like, wow, I'm awake. And so what happened is, though, when I was in my early 40s, is I discovered these metaphysical principles about living from the future backwards.
Mm.
So, and now I understand that healing is the domain of going back into the past, but transformation is about going into the future.
Mhm.
And if you really want to change your life, like radically, like unrecognizably, you have to go into the future. What's the future I'm committed to creating?
Right.
And when you take a stand for that future, what happens is that future begins to pull you to become who you would need to be in order for that to happen.
Ah.
So,
Uh-huh.
so when I did that, so all those years I was trying to heal myself and figure myself out and doing all this creative work, I had disastrous relationships,
Mhm.
one heartache after the other.
Mhm.
My particular pattern was unavailable people. So I was like a lightning rod for married men. For some reason, I'd walk into a room, 100 men, and the married men would all make a beeline towards me. It was just uncanny. The single available men did not even see me. They looked right through me. I was completely invisible.
Oh
And
my.
I felt like it was just kind of my fate, or it was just happening to me. I didn't understand how it was happening
Yeah.
through me and the
Mhm.
ways who I was being,
Mhm.
and so I desperately wanted to get married. I wanted to have a family, but all that showed up was really impossible love. So that was just one heartbreak, one disappointment after the other. I try to manage it. I go sometimes for like 3 years without dating anybody
Yes.
because I was trying to not get involved. And, it's
Yeah.
one thing to
Yeah.
get rid of what you don't want. It's another thing to manifest what you do.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'm in my early 40s and I decide from these metaphysical principles that I'm going to take an outrageous stand to find love. To
Mhm.
be engaged to a wonderful man by my birthday, 8 months out, no prospects for a husband, completely insane intention to set because I'd been trying to get married for 20 years.
8
Okay.
months you gave yourself to be engaged?
I gave myself 8 months to be engaged.
Oh, that's
And
brave.
but here's the thing, Joyce. My friend said something to me that changed my life because I called her up. I shared this. I said, I know this is crazy, but this is what I'm going to create. Right? This is the future I'm standing for. August 1st. Boom.
Yeah.
That ring's gonna be on my finger. And she said to me, Katherine, I will hold that intention with you and for you if you give me permission to hold you accountable to being the woman you would need to be in order for
Ah.
that to happen.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was really the beginning of my work.
Mhm.
Because rather than running out to try and make something happen, I went within to discover all the ways that I myself was the source of my experience
Mhm.
and to find the courage to start showing up differently. And that was a very deep inner journey.
Yeah.
And I took it. I started every day with meditation. I was asking the universe, what do I need to let go of? When you ask the universe a question, you get the answer. It just comes like an intuitive knowing, like, oh, okay, I need to just clean out my closet today and get rid of all those, all of my skinny clothes that I'm trying to get into one day.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
somehow I'm not good enough because I can't wear those clothes yet. No, I'm going to pay them for it. I'm going to love the body I'm in. You get information like that.
Mhm.
And then if you say to the universe, what do I need to really develop? in order to be ready for that future. Oh boy, do you get it? You better learn some healthy boundaries. You better get onto YouTube. You better go buy that book. You need to go to that seminar about boundaries. You've got to know how to protect yourself in a healthy way, so you don't have to put up walls. You can just negotiate boundaries.
Yes.
Right. And then the key question, what is my next step? And you get into action. So it's not just ruminating on why I am the way that I am. It's, who would I need to be in order to have this breakthrough? Very different question.
Yes. And I noticed also you didn't say, how do I fix the way I am? It's
no.
who I need to be, because that's so much more positive, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And we're all ever evolving creatures. If you learned how to ride a bike, or if you learn how to drive a car, you can learn how to have boundaries. You can learn how to, but mostly it's, Joyce, what I discovered, it's really kind of the beliefs that we hold in our bellies that came from early childhood trauma, right? That's why we're going back so much. That's what we're trying to fix, is the I'm not worthy story.
Yep.
But here's the thing, I might be healing that forever. I mean, my mother is a beautiful woman, and she was really young when she had me. She was very negligent. She was 18. What did she know? She hadn't been very nurtured herself.
Yes.
So, of course I was going to internalize that I'm not very valuable, or, other people matter more than me, all that kind of stuff that we do. There's only so much you want to analyze that story. At some point, you got to say, well, how am I showing up right now that's convincing people that I'm not valuable? How am I doing that? Right. And what's really true about that story? And how do I learn to mentor that younger self in my body, that tender self that comes up whenever there's an insecurity or a fear? How do I mentor that part of me? So, this is the stuff that I was doing. I wasn't really running out to try and make something happen, but a lot of magic. Long story short, I did meet a wonderful man in a very magical way. And I had actually dated him 6 years before and thought of him for years as the one that got away.
Oh.
And he just kind of plopped in my lap. I mean, this is the beginning of internet dating, because this is 20 years ago, over 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And internet dating was just starting. So the site that I got on, at my friend's encouragement, which I was really uncomfortable with doing, but I did it anyway because I was very coachable. And inside of my crazy intention, willing to do whatever the next step was. And there were no pictures. Right. Nobody had their pictures. Nobody had their names. No pictures over 20 years ago. You just had like a title, like, 2 hearts beating is one. Sweet, right. Things like that. And then they, I like bicycling. I want to have children, like, whatever people wanted to say about themselves. So anyway, I ended up getting on this site. 250,000 people chose one person to respond to. And it was the man who I'd been years thinking as the one that got away out of 250,000 people.
But you never saw him.
Never saw his picture. I didn't know it was him. I just wrote to him. I only wrote to one person out of that whole thing.
And did he have the similar feeling about you?
He didn't know who I was, so he wrote me back, and it was really open. But back then too, when he wrote me back, his name was in parentheses. It came right into my email box, and he had his email address, and then it had his name next to it, because this is, what did we know? So anyway, that's how. So I gasped, and then I wrote him, and I said, "Oh wow, we know each other." He said he fell off his chair. He fell off his chair because he had been in love with me all that time. Isn't that crazy?
I'm getting chills. This is too good.
So and then we had our daughter the next year. So, that was my happily ever after story. I wrote a book about it, Calling in the One. It became a national bestseller. I was teaching, like the Nordstrom story, right? I'm teaching other people how to do this, create this miracle. And then after 10 years, we divorced.
Really?
And that was, so that was my big, punch in the gut. Because here I am now a very well-known teacher of love and relationships. And, it wasn't perfect. And what happened is I got so captivated by my work, which was truthfully just such a joy. But we had a young child. He worked the night shift. I worked the day shift. We just went
Yes.
in really opposite directions for a really long time. Now I look back on it and I say, oh, wow. See, in the neglect that I suffered in my childhood, the missing development was how do you really create a we?
Yeah.
A big mistake that many of us make is thinking that the marriage is the relationship. But being married is just the contract to create the relationship.
Yeah.
You actually have to show up and generate we-ness constantly and keep turning towards your partner. So I didn't know that back then. We drifted apart. But the saving grace of our divorce was that we did it so elegantly, with so much thoughtfulness, so much kindness, because we decided early on that we wanted our daughter to have a happy childhood. And both of us had come from divorced families where we lost contact with one of our parents.
Right.
Because it was so contentious and difficult. He lost contact with his mother at the age of 1 because she came out as a lesbian. This is back in the 50s. That was very taboo.
Yeah.
So she couldn't reconcile like being a mother and being a lesbian. It was like back in the 50s, you kind of had to choose, right? That's how she felt anyway. So she just left and never looked back. And I, in the 60s, when I was 10 years old. My mother was on her third husband by then. And my mother and father, who just were at each other's throats for years in the divorce. I mean, just horrible, antagonistic divorce. And finally, he just gave up parental rights to my stepfather, my mother's third husband. But that devastated me. So, these are things that we recognized were very, very destructive. So we just decided as parents, we were going to do the work and not kind of leave it to our daughter to figure it out, which I think, when we go unconscious, we do. We just assume that the kids are going to work it out, that they'll be able to handle it. And it's easy to do that because the kids look like they're fine, but you don't find out till 20 years later that they're not fine at all. Or maybe 10 years later when they're promiscuous or they're doing drugs or they're starting to smoke cigarettes at the age of 12 or whatever they're doing. They start stealing money or, acting out. But none of us want to do damage to our kids. None of us want to limit our possibilities for love moving forward anyway in life. And, I think breakups are crossroads. You go through a divorce once, you go through a bad breakup once, you get your heart shattered. You never want that to happen again. Right? Okay. Thank you. So I wrote Conscious Uncoupling again, here we are at Nordstrom's finding the great sale. This works really well because Mark and I, look, we both have, I imagine he does look back and say, wow, I wish we had done that differently, or maybe that could have been different. You look at your life. I'm in my 60s now. I have a lot of areas like, oh, I wish I hadn't sold that house when I did. Or, we look back and gosh, I wish I had been smarter about that at the time.
Yes.
But how do you reconcile those losses and those mistakes in a way that deepens you into wisdom and freedom and love and happiness? So that's what conscious uncoupling is. It's the roadmap to how to not get stuck in the grief.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I had a very unhappy divorce, sad divorce. And I started reading your Conscious Uncoupling, and I got to the anger chapter, which is chapter 2. And I can't wait to read it because I experienced a lot of anger from me and also from him. It's so not good, but I'm ready to read that chapter.
Yeah. Well, and that anger that comes up, here's my philosophy on it. First of all, I don't think that nature has caught up to our culture, so that we are kind of hardwired to stay connected. And so if you think about like 1,000 years ago, if somebody wandered away from the tribe, they probably would die, right?
Mhm.
So we go into this primal threat state
Mhm.
at the end of a primary relationship. And then, of course, you add to that your children and not being with them or having access to them if you have kids, or you
Yeah.
add to that your home, which is your,
Yes.
your safe space in the world. And now all of a sudden, who's going to get the home? So all of these very primal things come up. And
Mhm.
the brain is kind of hardwired to go into fight or flight.
Mhm.
And I also think that because we're hardwired to stay bonded, that it's nature's trick to take us from soulmate to soul hate.
Mm.
Because that is a very engaged energy. When
Yes.
you are angry at someone, you're thinking about them, you have energy on them, right? There's a
It's a
lot of
form of
engagement.
yes,
There's
I
no
see that now.
there's no completion happening here.
Yeah.
So the art of conscious completion, which I'm calling conscious uncoupling, is
Mhm.
really about getting to a place of neutrality, of being neutral,
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
of really being grateful for that which you shared, being
Mhm.
protective of the love that got you into that relationship and what you built together. Right? It's
Mm.
so here's the reality is as much as we all love happily ever after, and I still love happily ever after, it's 400 years old, which is a hiccup on, the 30,000 years that human
Yes.
beings have walked the earth. It's a new
Yes.
ideal. It's a relatively new ideal. And it was created when the lifespan was less than 40 years of age.
Yeah.
And people did not have the choices that they have right now. There was no mobility. You were born into a village and you lived your whole life in that village and you died in that village and very little changed.
Right.
So, it just the cultural context of that story is not relevant to our lives. What's actually statistically more real for most of us is that we are slated to have 2 to 3 significant relationships in
Mhm.
our lifetime.
Mhm.
We really have to consciously evolve our capacity to separate, because that means basically 1 or 2 big breakups. And
Yeah.
some of us have more. If you have toxic patterns like me, it was a lot more than 1 or 2 big breakups. So, we're really looking at consciously growing ourselves to be capable of separating in a way that's mindful, in a way that's going to do the least amount of damage to ourselves, our children,
Mhm.
each other, um, and at least hold the tone of respect. So you're still going to have these big feelings.
Mhm.
How do we work with these big feelings? Well,
Yeah.
these are the 5 steps of conscious uncoupling. We start with step 1, and we start in the in where we are, and then that is that we're having huge feelings. We are traumatized. We are in a state of threat.
Mm.
Now, if you broke up a while ago and you're still struggling with regret and you can't get over it because it turned into what we call prolonged grief or complicated grief,
Yeah.
we deal with that in conscious uncoupling as well. So the emotions are not as acute because, look, a lot of us think that time is going to heal things. No, time will just dim down the acuteness of the pain that you're in. But time doesn't necessarily bring the growth that's necessary to lead to freedom. That's
Mhm.
ours to do.
Mhm.
Okay, so time doesn't really heal everything unless you,
Yeah.
you you have to liken your broken heart to a broken leg. So if you imagine, look, if you broke your leg and then just let time heal it, would your leg heal? Well, probably, but you'd never be able to run again.
Maybe crooked.
Maybe crooked, but that's
Yeah.
what happens in our heart,
Right. Yeah.
right? Okay. So
Mhm.
I've met people who 10, 20 years later never had another date. And
Mhm.
so that's the heart's equivalent to walking with a limp for the
Mhm.
rest of your life. So conscious uncoupling really helps us to go into the work that we need to do. So, for example, in step 1, we are looking at finding emotional freedom and how to transform those big negative emotions into the fuel that we need to make positive change. And
Mhm.
an example of that is if you're angry, first of all, it's probably for good reason.
Mm.
And something is waking up in you, and that is the reclamation of your right to be treated with respect. Right? Okay. So when you can name that, then you say, you know what, my intention is to begin treating myself with greater respect and to elevate my healthy sense of entitlement, that I be respected by anyone I let into my inner circle from this moment forward, right? So you take that energy and you move it somewhere that's going to change your life. And I also teach an exercise on how to take the acuteness of the suffering of the pain, the heart pain, and to begin to lessen it so that you can hold it, that you have it rather than it has you.
Yes.
Number two, step two, is how do we take responsibility for our part? We have two, and then the name of the step is reclaim your power in your life. And the reclamation of power is always about responsibility. So how do we look at our part when, number one, somebody has really wronged us? It was really unfair.
Yeah.
How do we look at our part? And then how do we look at our part without going into shame? Oh, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep choosing these narcissists? Right? That is not looking at our part.
Right.
Okay, that's just getting stuck.
We have the germ that they like, the honey. Yes.
So what we have to do is, I like to say, look, just validate 97% the other person's fault. Shame on them. What's my 3%? How did I overgive to try and prove my value? How did I silence myself because I wanted to keep the peace? How did I disappear my own feelings and needs even to myself and made the other person's feelings and needs more important than my own? We have to see these things clearly. Right. And if you notice, I'm basically asking questions that have nothing to do with me being wrong about anything. It's just like, what are the mechanics of that? What did I do? What did I not do? And what choices did I make? And to just see them clearly and then make an amends to yourself.
Yeah.
What you're going to do differently from this moment forward. That's how you restore trust in yourself, that this could not happen again. You have to outgrow who you were when you created that relationship.
Can you? Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In this part is I say my trust has been broken, but that I'm putting the trust on the other person that he would treat me correctly. But really, I have to be the one to claim the trust. Would that be right?
Well, you have to trust yourself. Look, I think this is important for us because, most of us are on a spiritual path and we aspire to unconditional love.
Yep.
Right. We're working towards that. But here's the rub on that. You have to balance unconditional love with the recognition that relationships cannot be unconditional, because relationships depend on trust, and trust depends on integrity.
Yes.
So if there's been a break in integrity, a break in trust, the fact that you do not trust the other person is just actually the correct response. If you've been lied to. But if you stay in a victimized place with that and you come to the conclusion like all men lie, right? Which I've heard people say, all men cheat, right? Like, well, actually, that's not accurate. No, they really don't. But the men who you find cheat, so you're the through line. Let's see if we can figure out what you're doing or not doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we have to look at that 3%, because you do have to trust yourself to make good choices. And that means you have to see it clearly. Like, what's my part? Oh, if men are lying to me all the time, I'd probably be wise to ask myself the question, how am I lying to myself? What is my relationship to truth? Am I telling the truth to myself? Do I tell the truth to others? Do I turn towards truth even when it's difficult to hear? Do I give people freedom to speak what's really true for them? Or do I fragment and get hysterical? So I teach them to lie to me. These are all very interesting inquiries.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So most of us don't know how to do that. We just go, what's wrong with me that all the men I find are cheaters?
Mm-hmm.
And then we stop there. We go just kind of dig ourselves into the hole of shame and then don't want to date anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Or maybe, or maybe, I don't know, we find somebody super safe and then we're bored out of our minds. That's the compensation for that.
That won't work.
But if you're not turning towards truth, all relationships get boring.
Yeah.
Really? After a while. I mean, unless you're caught in a swirl of the narcissism, since we're like, then they're going to create drama as drama as the substitute for love. Drama.
Yes.
But you get sick inside of that, So you got out of that relationship. Good on you. But are you guys still mad at each other, or have you found a way to reconcile that?
Well, I have learned they do not like to be left. And so he used my children against me.
Oh boy.
So he was tough. He passed in January.
Oh boy.
So there's almost kind of like a freedom. I got my children back so.
Well, this is a really good
lesson.
Yeah, but this is a really good inquiry, and I get it all the time. Does conscious uncoupling work for people who have really difficult ex-partners?
Yes.
Right? Really, like you did.
I can see, had I read this book earlier, which I really encourage everybody in such a situation to do this, I would have gotten some relief for myself, understanding of myself. Not that it would have changed the past, but it would have given me some peace and understanding.
Beautiful. And by the way, Gwyneth and Chris popped conscious uncoupling into the lexicon, and when they did, and they were influenced by my teach. I mean, they got it from me. So, but when they did, people misunderstood that, oh, this is something two people do together. No, it's not. And the goal is not friendship.
No.
The goal is peace. The goal is for the individual who's reading the book and doing the process to be at peace. And it also does give you leverage on how to work with a difficult personality. So that things can go smoother. And there's a karma to it. Like, look, if you created babies with someone who has a personality disorder, we're not going to be able to wave a magic wand and suddenly they're a person.
Right.
It's not going to happen. So you have to deal with the karma of what you've created, but there's a way that you can kind of skim over it and lead it towards a higher level. You have to be the leader of love. What happens when we have toxic people in our lives is they behave so egregiously, so shockingly selfishly, that we then get into reaction, which means that the person with the lesser consciousness is in charge of the relationship. And that's a very bad idea.
Yes.
So we have to be the leaders of love, and we have to actually be a little savvy. You understand someone's limitations. So you speak, it's almost like if someone speaks a foreign language, you have to learn that foreign language, and the foreign language is narcissism. So the foreign language is, don't you look handsome today? A lot of sugar, then maybe a request or a boundary, and then more sugar.
Yes.
Just because you know what you're dealing with, Right. But if you're really committed to having a peaceful environment in which your children can thrive, or both of you having, the best possible relationship. So conscious uncoupling really helps to clarify how to take the high road, how to elevate the quality of the connection. And then you just remember there's things to be responsible for. This is what you created. I'm sure Mark has that with me. That's my husband. Mark is my husband. I'm sure he has those things with me. I know I have those things with him. You know, sometimes he would just be kind of vacant or absent or in certain areas. And I go, okay, that's who I married. Like, that's just Mark.
Yeah.
And this is my responsibility now, is to create a good environment for our daughter. This is temporary. I can handle this. It helped me to grow, to just, you know, rise to the occasion. So, you know, we're all imperfect human beings finding our way and looking to create, you know, beautiful lives. I think that there is a phenomenon, though, of breakups being this crossroad. Many go on to live a lesser life in the aftermath of that heartbreak. And what conscious uncoupling is helping you to grow and develop, you know, and open yourself to a much higher level of love, a healthier level of love, to outgrow the toxic patterns.
So was this book a result of your transition through the transition of the end of your couple?
Well, so it was a hybrid. Right. So I would say that there's a way that conscious uncoupling as a book speaks to the broken places within us on a very deep level. I really get in the center of it. I mean, you know, it's funny. I'll just let you in on a little secret that we authors know, that when you're writing a book, everything in your life starts to be about that in your personal life. So I hadn't been in therapy for years, but when I started writing Conscious Uncoupling, I got so crazy. Like, you know how at the end of a relationship you get crazy? That I had to hire a therapist just to contain me. Like I like, as I was writing it, because I was in the center of it. Like, this is what it feels like. Now, the brokenness was not from my relationship with Mark. I did not feel broken from that loss. I felt great grief about that loss, but because Mark is such a genuinely kind person, and you know, and we did this in a very contained way. We didn't have that experience.
Yes.
But I've had those in the past, so I knew. I've had actually two, like, just devastating, almost like, you know, blow the house down to the ground kind of. Don't eat for a year, dream about someone for 20 years. I mean, I've had two of those really crushing, is the word for it, crushing breakups. So it's a hybrid of that. And as I was writing it, that's what I went into the center of, because I knew that mostly, you know, and that's mostly the person who, I think for the most part, although I hear that you were the one who left. So I'm not sure that this is true for you, but most people who go into that crushed place are the ones who have been left. Right. Yeah. So there's a difference between someone who leaves and someone who's leaving, who's left.
No, I felt left for 5 years. I was left.
Yeah. So you went through the crush of it before you actually physically left the relationship.
Right.
Well, good for you. I mean, that takes a lot of strength to leave.
Well, I think part of it was I was on my journey already. For me, I
Yeah.
hadn't gotten there. You know, I honestly, Catherine, do we ever totally get to a place of total peace and acceptance? And I know we're working toward happiness, but I don't know. I just keep feeling I'm always peeling a layer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that there is a way that we can create our lives outside of the old story. Okay, and create our lives outside of the wounds of our, because you can trace back now, you know, the things that got wounded in that marriage all the way back to when you were a child. Yes,
definitely.
Yeah, so that's called your source fracture story. We deal with that in step 3. And we go back to that wounding and look at the meaning you made, and then how you have shown up inside of that meaning, the choices you made inside of that as an identity in a way that duplicated the story, kept that story alive. In step 3, we have you awaken to a deeper truth so that you're actually no longer identified with the traumatized self.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't gotten rid of the traumatized self. She's still there, right? So there's always like a younger part of us. So we're almost like trees. We have all these rings. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't get rid of that part of us, but we do form a relationship with that younger self, such that that younger self is no longer in charge of how love goes and no longer running the show. So then you
Yes.
create a life from your adult, wise, spiritual, deep, intelligent self that does
Mm-hmm.
not contain those same patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I see that.
Okay. So we're all on a journey together. But I think that many of us have been trying to outgrow the patterns of our childhood by staying in therapy. Let me tell you something about this, and I get to say this because I am a therapist, is that there's a danger to keep going back into the past to heal, to try and transform. First of all, there's an assumption that if I get to the bottom of this, my life is going to change.
Yes.
But there's no bottom. It's a bottomless pit. There's no there. And in some ways, it does damage at some point because it's serving to solidify the self that we formed in relationship to that original trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all alone, or I'm not
Yes.
valuable. Because
Yes.
from a metaphysical perspective, whatever we put our attention on grows.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
So when we say I'm standing for a future with a partner who I respect, who respects me, where there's laughter in our home and joy and shared vision and shared values, where there's kindness and love,
Mm-hmm.
and that's consistent over time,
Mm-hmm.
and that conflict is engaged in a way that roots down love as opposed to damages it. And you stand for that future and you put your attention there, like, who am I in that future fulfilled?
I see.
And you
Yeah.
start growing yourself in that direction, you really do outgrow your patterns and you create a new life.
Yeah.
Right. So look, it's a complicated and it's an authentic and it's a true question. I think that happiness is not something that we go after directly. It's kind of created inside of the conditions of our lives. We have the conditions for happiness, and happiness emerges.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it leads to another question: how personally happy can we be when the world is on fire? So, okay, so the world right now is filled
Yes.
with a lot of anxiety and a lot of suffering. A lot of us who are
Mhm.
empaths are kind of holding that in our bodies a lot. So now we have to work with that. And those of us who are loving people on the path, you know, even if our lives are really working, we want to be of service to elevating consciousness in the world and helping our neighbors and our kids. You know, I you know, personally, I kind of sponsor as many kids as I can because the kids are hopeless right now. They feel kind of,
Yeah.
you know, they feel kind of scared and anxious. They're not sure there's a future for them. So I get in there with as many kids. And my daughter is now 20, soon to be 21.
Mm.
I have semi unofficially adopted her best friend whose mother left when she was 4 or when she was 8 because she got mentally ill. And so she's my bonus daughter.
Mm.
And now she has an aunt who had a foster daughter who's just going off to college, got a full scholarship to college. So I'm now sponsoring
Wow,
her.
wonderful.
Right. So we have to
Yeah.
sponsor the young people and really,
Yeah.
and just take a stand for them and give our love to them. You know, this is me in my 60s who's like, okay, legacy, you know, paying it forward. So but happiness is an interesting question. I get happy when I take care of the kids. That's what's
Yeah.
making me happy these days.
Well, I did something. I bought a dog.
Oh my gosh. Aren't you brave? That's a lot of energy.
Yes. I had forgotten. My dog that I had to put down last year was 16 years old.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that was traumatic at that time, but she was ready. Bless her heart. She had stuck around long enough. She didn't want to leave, but she needed to go. And so anyway, this puppy has totally torn up my whole routine, my exercise routine, which was nada. At least now I'm getting up and down. And I'm saying every day, I love you. I love you. And I noticed that yesterday. And I went, oh my gosh, what a great thing. I'm saying I love you every day.
Beautiful.
And just pouring out of my heart. So I really recommend, if you know what you're missing, go out there and get it.
Yeah,
There's tons of
beautiful.
puppies. You give it through Loving Children. I mean, whatever it is that's the reward of getting to know yourself. You know what really lights you up. Now, it was important to me to have that puppy in my house.
Beautiful.
Even though pooping and potting is not under control.
You have to take up all your carpets.
They're up where I can.
Yeah.
But so we're going to school, puppy school. But,
very sweet.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah,
we
that's
always
beautiful.
have something out there if we just remember. There's something out there to light us up. So you have an offering today for our listeners?
So look, obviously we're on the pathway of growing our capacity to love and be loved in very genuine, very healthy ways that really elevate the quality of our lives. So I offer a teaching once a week, which is just kind of an elegant nugget of something to practice that week. For the Love Out Loud messages that we send every week. And you can just get that right on the homepage of my website, KatherineWoodwardThomas.com. I will also say, I'm not sure when this episode is airing, but we do have.
It's on I can tell you right here.
Okay.
It'll be on 9/7. So that's
okay, great.
September the 7th.
Okay, great. So I do have a coach training for Conscious Uncoupling that begins on the 22nd. If anybody's interested in finding out, they can go to consciousuncouplingInstitute.com.
And that's August the 22nd? Or
September?
September.
Yeah. Are you talking about September when the?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're approaching the end, but I always have to ask one more question.
Okay, good.
What would you say was probably the most challenging part of your journey that sticks out for you the most? That you when I ask that question, it just goes to it. What would you say?
Well, I think there's been various challenging parts along the way. And probably I'd have a different answer on a different day.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about conscious uncoupling, I think the most challenging part was sometimes when you have a heartbreak, your whole faith in the overall goodness of life can be shaken up. And so to continue to choose love and to choose to grow love and to choose the path of kindness and fairness when your heart has been shattered and your life turned upside down and inside out in a way that you feel is unfair is really heroic. And those are our own Job moments where we are not getting anything that we want. And as a matter of fact, everything is exactly what we do not want. And we feel betrayed by God. And to say, I bless life anyway, and I choose love anyway. And I think that that's where our character is really forged. And to continue to be a believer in life and a believer in love is actually a choice in those moments. And now I can look back and say, thank God. I will tell you one little quick story about that is when I was maybe 7 years ago, as I was writing Conscious Uncoupling, it's really interesting. I was a couple of months in, and I found that I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when you're in a writing space, you're very we've all heard this. I don't know that everybody's had this experience, but there's a way you kind of have a direct connection with the divine. Your partnership with the energies of life channels are wide open. So I got diagnosed with cancer. I got the call from the doctor's office one day that said I tested positive and I did have cancer. And I asked, what stage is it? Very important question.
Yes.
And they said, we can't tell you that. Your doctor will tell you that in 3 days when you have your appointment.
Gosh.
So you're there for 3 days not knowing. It was a wild ride. And it reminded me of the experiences. If you drove off a cliff, what I imagine it must be is you're going, like you're just going through the air, like, wow, I wonder what's going to happen when we touch the ground there. So, but in that space, I got a message that was just clear as a bell. And what the message said was, you are not going to die from this.
Mm-hmm.
You set this up before you incarnated as a kind early exit had you never become the woman that you became. But because you have chosen love so many thousands of times, this cancer will just wash through you and you will remember it like a bad case of the hiccups. That's exactly how it came to me. So the gift of that was, oh, okay. And I never went into fear. So the whole ride was just like one surrender ride. It was actually a very joyful time, believe it or not, because of that. But I share that story because it kind of emphasizes how much it matters that we choose love even when it's difficult.
Yes.
It really does matter. And those choices are what's creating our future. So we want to choose wisely and choose well how to navigate all of the difficult moments of our lives and continue to choose to have faith in the goodness of life, even when we're, living the evidence to the contrary.
Well, I have to say goodbye.
I know we got so bonded.
I could go on for
now we have to go through a conscious uncoupling because we're in love with each other and we're all bonded. See, we really are born to bond here.
I know. Thank you so much for your time. This has been so valuable to my listeners as well as to me. I cannot thank you enough for giving of your time again for this recording.
Absolutely. So, thank you, Joyce, for having me. Lots of love to everyone.
Thank you. Now, for you all out there listening, you got so much good information from this podcast, from my guest. I hope that you will go to the website, you will get your free, and you will pick one of those things that she's going to share with you. The freebie is only a continuation of their generosity. And so please go there, take advantage of knowing that there is something very special for you. Because as she said, we go through difficult times and yet there's love around us. So that's your wish. That is your assignment for the week. And I hope that you will tell others about this show. Share it. Just push the share button and let it go to a friend that desperately needs to hear this message that Katherine has been so great to share with us today.
Joyce Buford returns next week at the same time for another edition of Second Wind. Through the Joyce Buford Empowerment System, women are receiving the support they need through their transitions and are able to reclaim their true purpose with confidence. They receive the tools they need to map out new lives. You can find out more about her coaching services at joycebufordempowers.com.